Hi, everyone. This is Mark Rambo with the Washington County Democrats, and I have the pleasure today of speaking with Evelyn Kocher. Thank you for taking this time today, Evelyn.
Thank you so much for having me. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
absolutely. First off, why don't you tell me a little bit about what your journey that led you to running for Beaverton City Council?
Absolutely. So I grew up in Beaverton. I immigrated here when I was a kid with my family to escape political violence in our country of origin. And I went to Beaverton schools my whole life. And I graduated from Beaverton High School just down the street from City Hall. After going to college and living abroad for a while, I moved back to Oregon in 2020 and got a job working as an organizer with the Oregon Student Association. Um, when I was there, I came out as transgender and started receiving treatment and realized that even though my health insurance was really good, I struggled to get my insurance company to pay for some of the vital treatment that I needed. So I talked with some of the folks on the board of my organization. They connected me to Basic Rights Oregon and to the Reproductive Health Equity Working Group, convened by then Speaker Dan Rayfield. And we ended up coming up with a bill that became House Bill 2002 in 2023, which ended up passing some of the most comprehensive protections for reproductive health care and gender affirming care of any state in the country. Ever since then, I have realized that the best thing that we can do to prevent harm to people in our system is try to change it from the inside. And that's when I realized that I want to run for office and be a voice for people who haven't historically had a voice and use the knowledge that I've gained working in political causes for good and for the betterment of my communities.
Oh, wonderful. Thinking about the fact that you immigrated here to Beaverton as a kid, can you talk a little bit about how maybe that might inform your role on city council or what that's been like for you in general?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a challenge, definitely, to be an immigrant in this country. I remember that we moved here just before 9/11, and we went from putting up decorations for Ramadan and celebrating Eid and talking with people so openly about our national origin and our religion to being nervous um, that the revolving nature, the lunar calendar that Islam adheres to, um, we were nervous that Eid, the biggest holiday, Eid al-Fitr, the biggest holiday in the Muslim calendar, would happen too close to 9/11, and we would have ignorant people stirring up even more anti-Muslim sentiment because of it. And it was a really difficult time um, to be an immigrant in the U.S., to be a Muslim in the U.S.
Yeah.
And I was lucky that I got to live in a welcoming place like Beaverton, where there were lots of other immigrant kids, where there was a thriving Muslim community, where my mosque was 10 minutes from my house, where I got to be in school with lots of kids who looked like me and who had similar stories to me. And I was so grateful for the diversity that a city like Beaverton was able to offer. And I think that's part of why I love this city so much. I've spent a lot of time living abroad. I spent a lot of time living in Portland, and I always end up coming back to Beaverton just because it is a fantastic place to call home. We are so diverse, we are so unified, and we work together to create a really amazing community. And I don't know if I'd want to live anywhere else.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. I'm curious. I know you've been very outspoken about transgender issues. I'm curious to know how you think that experience will inform your role on city council, particularly considering the current state of affairs in the country when it comes to the transgender community.
I'm so grateful for a lot of the work that's been done at the state level, especially, but also the national level when it comes to LGBTQ plus rights and when it comes to trans rights. There's so much work that would not have been possible without our allies in at the state level, um, including HB 2002. But I think it's about time that trans folks started to be able to have their own voices and speak out on their own issues and not rely on allies to speak up for them. So often people are talking about needing to compromise on trans issues in order to win back the silent majority of Americans. And they don't realize that, trans people have kitchen tables too.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and these are our issues too. We're not something that can be compromised on. We want to live our lives as full members of our communities. And I think it's really vitally important. If I were elected, I would be the first out trans woman to win elected office in the state of Oregon. I would be one of fewer than 10 trans women of color elected to office in all of the United States. And I think that elevating the voices of trans women who are willing to speak out and willing to be representatives for our communities at a time like this when our communities are under attack is more vital than ever, especially in Oregon, which is one of the queerest states in the country. We really need this type of representation that right now we don't have. And I'm honored to have the chance to bring that type of representation and be a voice for my community in whatever way that I can.
I'm curious now that you mentioned that uh, of what you know about, and if Danica Rome, who I believe now is in the Virginia State Senate, if she in
Yes.
particular has been an inspiration to you.
Yeah, I Danica Rome, Zoe Zephyr in a state representative from Montana, Kim Koko Iwamoto, a state representative from Hawaii. Um, these have all been inspirations to me just for their willingness to stand up. And you know, trans women get so much vitriol just from existing in this world,
Right.
and their willingness to step up and be representatives in their communities and be willing to subject themselves to even more vitriol and hatred um, for having the audacity to do so is just a real inspiration because it shows me that they have this fierce desire to give back and make their communities a better place, even if it does come at their own personal expense. And I think that's really inspiring. And there are so many trans women who don't have the chance to do things like that
Yeah.
because they're unemployed or underemployed, because they're in abusive living situations, or because they're housing insecure, um, or because they are struggling so much financially with the costs of transitioning, both socially and financially, that they're unable to even consider stepping into a role like this. And as much as the difficulties that I've had to face over the course of my transition and my life, I'm one of the lucky ones, and I know that, and I feel like it's my responsibility to step up and speak up for the people who don't have the same opportunities that I do.
Great. Yeah, that's great. I'd like to ask you, particularly, obviously, this interview is for the Washington County Democrats. I'm curious to hear what you think as far as how the Democratic Party values align with yours, and if there's anything, particularly in the national, with the National Democratic Party, where you feel like the party is falling short.
I think that our values are fairly aligned. I have been really happy to see that the Democrats have not fallen prey to throwing immigrants and trans people under the bus like so many left parties in so many other countries. I think that there's a lot more that can be done in terms of the national Democratic platform when it comes to progressive taxation, when it comes to progressive economic policy, um, and when it comes to creating social safety nets, and when it comes to pushing for really important things like socialized healthcare, Medicare for all, um, that are going to be really vital for a healthy, progressive society that every other high income society in the world has.
Yeah.
Um, I also am hoping that the Democratic Party establishment is more willing to be progressive and leftist and forward thinking on foreign policy when it comes to supporting, um, when it comes to, first of all, opposing the wars in Venezuela and Iran, but also um, more actively opposing the military actions of Israel and the genocide of the Palestinian people. Um, I think that it's really important to take that moral stance because as we've seen in Venezuela and in Iran and in Israel and in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank and in so many places around the world, the murdering of civilians um, is never an acceptable um, casualty of war, of military action. It cannot be something that we just come to accept um, a as a the cost of doing business. we need to stand up and really push for um, more of our morality to come through in our foreign policy. We can't just stand by and let these things happen.
Yeah, great. Well said. I'd like to ask you now, bringing it local to Beaverton, if you could talk about a few things, maybe a couple of things that you think about when you get on council that you'd really like to work on or focus on.
Absolutely. So I grew up in South Beaverton. I grew up going to Cooper Mountain Elementary School. That was my local school, near the south end of 170th. So it's been really cool to see how the South Cooper Mountain area has been exploding lately with all the new housing and the construction of Mountainside High School. It's an area that has historically been um, really underdeveloped, and it's really cool to see us working on building more housing there to address our city's housing shortage. I think that there are a couple of developments there, like the county microtransit pilot, the spot that is really great for promoting mobility down there. But the fact of the matter remains that there is no transit access to anything southwest of Murray and Shoals Ferry.
Mm,
If you are a student at Mountainside High School, if you want to go visit Progress Ridge Mall and you don't have a car, there is simply not a effective way for you to get there. If you're a student at Mountainside High School and you want to visit anywhere else in Beaverton, you can't do it. And so I think that, especially with the amount of population growth we've seen down there, really collaborating with TriMet to expand transit access in Southwest Beaverton, where we've been seeing that type of explosive growth, is going to be really vital for promoting economic mobility, promoting opportunity, and also bringing down our city's emissions because car use is the single largest driver of the city of Beaverton's greenhouse gas emissions.
mm,
And bringing a transit line to that neighborhood will do a whole lot in terms of giving folks options and getting folks out of their cars. The other thing is that because of my time living in Portland, I loved biking around Portland. I still love biking around Portland, but it is I've always had mixed feelings about doing so in Beaverton.
mm,
Growing up, I living near Cooper Mountain, I had to bike to school a decent amount, and I would have to bike along Murray. And
mm.
I don't know about you, but I really don't want to be biking alongside cars that are going 50 miles an
Right?
hour as a 15-year-old trying to get to school. And yet, on the city of Beaverton's bike map, that is categorized as one of the highest levels of bike infrastructure that the city offers because the bike lanes have about a 1 yard buffer to them between the bikes and the cars. And I'm grateful that that buffer is there, but I think that we can do so much better when it comes to protecting pedestrians and cyclists with our infrastructure, creating actual physical barriers that will make cyclists and pedestrians safer from vehicular traffic. It makes a huge difference if you are biking and there's a foot of an extra yard of space in between you and 50 mile an hour cars, or if there's an actual bollard between you and 50 miles an hour car, or if there's a concrete barrier. And I think that that's something we should really work on because ultimately, if you look at the streets that are designated bikeways in Beaverton, major bike arteries in Beaverton, almost none of them have any physical protection. Murray, Shoals Ferry, Lombard, almost no physical protection. And we really need to do that because ultimately my goal for the city of Beaverton is that we need to have bike infrastructure that you would feel safe sending your kid to bike alone on. And right now, I don't think we have that.
Okay, yeah, great. Let's see. I wanted to ask you. I know that in this race, the city councilors and mayor of Beaverton are endorsing different people and for different reasons. But when you get on the city council, how do you envision that working as far as working with colleagues who maybe were not supportive of your candidacy?
I really I've gotten to see how Beaverton has grown from when I was a kid to now. And a lot of that is attributable to the people who have served on city council between then and now, including some people who I don't agree with, and including some people who are not good people. I mean, Denny Doyle is absolutely not a good person. But I think that the growth that we have seen that has been pushed through by the current iteration of city council in terms of increasing urban development and density in the center of the city is really great work. And so I think that there are absolutely elements that I can work with them on where we can be very productive because ultimately um, you need to stand fast where you can and compromise where you have to. And finding areas where you have in common with other folks and being able to work together is an essential part of politics. I ultimately think that Beaverton is a better city than it was when I was growing up. And I'm thankful for the work of the folks who have worked for the city of Beaverton and have served on Beaverton City Council for a lot of that development. And at the same time, there are elements where we don't agree, that where I want to be able to push things, and I'm looking forward to doing so while working with them on the things that they have succeeded at to make our city better.
Okay. I want to ask you as well, kind of bringing it back to the national, but also how that impacts the local. The way I look at things right now, it's more and more important what our local government does because of what's going on in the federal government and the ways that we can't rely on them and the harm that they're doing. So thinking about like the harm that's being caused by ICE and the harm that's doing to our communities with the Trump regime's economic policies, disregard for rule of law and human rights. How do you think about that as far as how a city council should respond?
I always like to say that 90% of what affects a person's day to day life is going to be controlled at the local level. It's going to be your city council, your county commission, your state legislature. That's going to affect most of the things in your built environment. It's going to affect whether you can have a coffee shop in the basement of in the first floor of your apartment building. It's going to affect whether or not this street gets a crosswalk. It's going to affect what school your kids end up going to. Um, and that's all local government. And so often we think that the only political difference that we can make is at the national level, is at Congress, is with the president, and that's just simply not the case. There's so many things that we can do at the local level that will have such a big impact on people's lives. And there are steps that I would love for the city to take in regards to federal government overreach that I really wish they could take, that other cities have proactively taken that we have not done yet. The city of Portland, the city of Hillsborough, and the city of Chicago have all taken steps to ensure that federal officials, especially DHS officials, are not allowed to use their property for staging of immigration raids without a signed judicial warrant. And Beaverton has not taken that step yet, which is really very disappointing because there have been multiple videos that have come out from citizen journalists on social media that have shown ICE staging in on city property, in the parking lots of the police station, in the parking lots
Yeah.
of the municipal court,
Yeah.
and even reassuring folks that calling 911 if you do see um, a kidnapping by DHS, by ICE, and having first responders show up with body cameras to film the interaction and do nothing, that would still be helpful. Just because then those people who were kidnapped would have the video to use at their hearings.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's so many things that we could do that we aren't doing. We could allocate more money towards impacted families and businesses like Hillsborough and Washington County have done. We could more concretely track calls to 911 about um, interactions with federal officials. Um, we could train our city staff on how to respond if they do see ICE, if they do see a kidnapping in progress. There's so many things that we could do that we haven't done because it doesn't feel like the urgency is there. And it's really disappointing. And I think that the difference between what can be done and what is being done is not a difference of values. I know that my values align with a lot of the folks who are in local government in this county. However, I think it is a issue of how much they are willing to push back against the system, how much they are willing to wield the power that they do have in creative ways to help their community. And for me, my community is not only Beaverton, but my community is the immigrant communities of Beaverton because I am a part of that community.
Mm-hmm.
My community is the Latino community of Beaverton because I grew up in that community. My community is the queer community of Beaverton because I am a part of that community. I think that when we're talking about how you can take stronger action to protect the people of Beaverton, we really need to consider how the folks in power are willing to wield the power that they do have to protect their community, and then ask who they are treating as parts of their community.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, you have an opponent in this race,
Mhm.
and so I'm curious what you thought. And obviously, you're focused on getting your message out as the main thing. But when people are deciding to vote, obviously they're picking between two. How might be a way that you would differentiate your candidacy and why people should choose you over your opponent?
Absolutely. I think that I have a great resume. I've worked in politics my whole career. I've gotten legislation passed at the statewide level multiple times. I am on the boards of 6 different local and statewide organizations, making decisions that impact people across the state, setting budgets, um, and I've been important voices on those commissions. And I represent communities that have almost never served in the halls of power anywhere. And I think that the other main difference between me and my opponent is not our values. I think we have very similar values, and I really appreciate that, because democracy is better when you have 2 good candidates in the race. But I think that our differences is when you look at our platforms and our endorsers. Um, so many of the folks who have and organizations who have endorsed my opponent are from the more moderate and the more centrist wing of things. And I don't think that's what we need right now. I think we need folks who are willing to stand up, take bold stances, push back against the system instead of trying to work within it. Um, Try to manipulate the system from the inside to make things concretely better for working people, and um, really be willing to stand up and say, hey, things as they are right now are not working for my community. So we need to take bold action to make things better. And based on the folks that have endorsed my opponent, it seems like she's more willing to work within the system, which is totally okay, but is also not something that the communities that I want to represent are needing right now. They want bold action to change how the system works so it can better serve them. And that's what I'm looking forward to do.
Okay, thanks. So those are basically the questions that I was curious about and wanted to see what your thoughts were. But I also do want to sort of, as we start to wind up here, give you an opportunity to talk about maybe some things that we didn't touch on, or if you want to maybe talk about how people can get involved in your campaign. Anything you'd like to share?
Ooh, I will talk about how to get involved in a second. But
I
the one
thought you
thing that
might
we
like
didn't
to.
touch on is I think Beaverton is one of the things that makes Beaverton a fantastic place to live is the fact that we are the crossroads of Washington County. Um, the Washington County is the economic engine of the state, and all of the county has to go through Beaverton to get to Portland, and all of Portland has to go through Beaverton to get to the rest of Washington County. And
Yeah.
I think that gives us tremendous opportunity. And one of the best things about Beaverton is our Max line. When I was a kid, I never once drove to a Thorns game, a Timbers game, a Blazers game. I always took the Max, because why would you not? You
Right.
would have to pay through the nose for parking. And yet, less than 5% of Beavertonians, less than 5% of dwellings in Beaverton are within a quarter-mile catchment of a Max station,
Mm.
because our land use around many of our Max stations is really, really bad. When we look at our Max stations, the only stations with built up housing near them within city limits are Beaverton Central and El Monica. That's it. We are missing so much opportunity when it comes to all the rest of our Max stations. Um, Sunset TC and Beaverton TC both have giant empty fields next to them. Milliken Way is surrounded by a giant parking lot. Beaverton Creek is sitting next to yet another empty field.
Mm.
And Willow Creek is just outside of city boundaries, but is slowly being built up, and I really appreciate that. People want to live in walkable communities near transit. And we can see that with the popularity of, first of all, the Round at Beaverton Central is becoming a fantastic place to live, but also with the success of Orenco Station, the first ever transit oriented development project built in the United States from the ground up. And so figuring out how to expedite the permitting process for multifamily housing and multi-use housing, and densify our built environment by streamlining zoning laws near our train stations would be a phenomenal way to make sure that more people can afford to live in Beaverton, so we can build more housing and build more walkable communities in our town. I think that um, the thing to remember is that 30% of people in Oregon do not or cannot drive.
Mm.
And we need to be building housing for them too. I think a great way to, a great law to base things off of was the recently passed SB 79 in California, which automatically upzones parcels within a quarter mile of max stations for multifamily and mixed use development. And I think that would be a phenomenal place to start, and that would really transform the fabric of Beaverton.
Okay, great.
But more on
Yes.
how to get involved.
Yes, let's
If
talk
you
about
want to
that.
donate or get involved with my campaign, we are going to start knocking doors this week, and we're really excited. If you want to know more, you can follow me at Evelyn for Beaverton on all social media platforms, or go to my website at evelynforbeaverton.com.
Very good. Well, I appreciate you taking the time with me today. This has been very informative, and I just want to wish you luck on your race. And yeah, and that's about it. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much for the chance to interview. I'm really excited for my race. Go out and vote May 19th. And yeah, have a great rest of your day, Mark.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.